All right.
Cool.
Cool. I'm so excited, Alexandra, to have you here today. Everybody, I'm here with Alexandra, and she is an American-Austrian art historian, curator, and writer. And she graduated with a first class honors from University of College of London with a BA in History of Art, and continued her education with an MA in Arts Administration and Cultural Policy at Goldsmiths, graduating with distinction in 2021. She worked part-time as well at Sotheby's auction house in London since 2017. And she curates and writes on a freelance basis. And her specializations include feminism and artificial intelligence and contemporary art, museum and government cultural policies, as well as accessibility and engagement in the arts. In 2020, she also co-founded C20, an association for international curatorial practice based in Vienna, Austria, with which she undertakes various cultural and artistic projects. And that's not all. She also founded in 2021 her podcast All About Art, with the aim of bringing all the things art closer to people in an accessible and engaging format. I mean, this is super exciting, and I'm really, really, just so honored to have you here, Alexandra Steinacker. I forgot to mention that your last name before, so thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. You make me sound so impressive.
You are, you do.
Thank you so much for that amazing introduction.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. I think, yeah, I don't even know where to start, but it's impressive. Like, what made you want to become, let's start with that, art historian?
I think that it was actually not a long decision for me. I didn't take a long time to contemplate what I wanted to study and what I wanted to do with my life. But I do think that it was a couple of years in the making in terms of I moved to Austria when I was 14. I moved from the United States and I didn't speak a word of German. I moved to Austria with my mom, who is Austrian herself, and she put me in a school that was very business focused because that's how it works when you go to high school in Austria. You can pick a high school that focuses on a certain direction that you want to go in. And so this was called the Handelsakademie. And I had classes in business studies and accounting. And I went through it for 3 years, learning German, ended up passing classes, feeling good. But actually, I hated it. I hated all of the topics that were covered. And so, being a teenager, going through puberty and hard times and things like that, I ended up going to therapy. And I remember the therapist said, you know, you can make a change, right? You can switch schools if you want to. And thank goodness that therapist told me to do that because I switched schools and I ended up going to a high school that was focused on general knowledge. And I had art history in my final semester of high school. And I was taught by Gerold Tusch, who is a practicing artist and professor in Salzburg in Austria. And I always say that I kind of owe my decision to study art history to him because he was so passionate about the subject and so knowledgeable. And he really taught us high school students in such a fun way. And I remember going up to him and saying, I want to go to London. I want to study art history. And he was like, you do know that studying art history and going into this is different to how we have it in class here at school, right? And I said, I don't care. I love it. And so he wrote my university recommendation that ended up getting me into UCL, which is wonderful. And that was really what inspired me to be an art historian. I remember just thinking, what jobs can I do as an art historian? And going to my mom and saying, this is what I want to study, because I had gone through, finding out that I didn't really love business at all. I didn't love it if I wasn't intrinsically interested in what I was thinking about. Um, I didn't love because I worked in retail, didn't love working in retail, didn't love working in hospitality because I worked in that as well as a teenager. But now I can really say I'm so happy that I studied art history because I do get up every day or nearly every day and am really happy to go and do the jobs that I do.
That's amazing, and how impactful psychologist or a teacher can be, like when
Yeah.
they are passionate about something. And that's amazing. So right now, what explain to us and the viewers, like what's your day-to-day right now with what you're doing? And you've got your podcast, and you've also got the C20. Tell me more about that.
Sure. So it's really different each day. So today is Monday. I have the day off because I work Tuesdays to Saturdays in a gallery in St. James in London called Scarsted. And so with my full-time job, I'm a sales assistant to the senior sales director, which is super fun. The team at Scarsted is amazing, and I really enjoy working there. And I'm learning so much. You know, I am 26 right now, and I've done internships and I worked at Sotheby's part-time, but I still have so much to find out in the sector. And so learning how a gallery runs and um, you know, working with my colleagues and doing the work that we do, it's awesome. And then on my days off, I do various things that contribute to all of my other projects. So it ranges from, for example, with C20, I co-curated with the co-founder of C20, Paula Marszalek, who is based in Vienna. I co-curated a couple of exhibitions last year, for example, but this is on a very project to project.
Oh.
Oh no,
So I don't know what happened, but
neither do I. Anyway, where did it cut off and where should I continue?
yeah, so it cut off at you saying that it's a project from project, and I didn't hear the rest. With
Perfect. Okay, cool. So you got basically everything. um, so with C20, it's on a project to project basis. And so right now we don't have anything in the works per se, but it depends on when we want to do things, how we see opportunities. Because last year, one of the things that we did was we submitted a proposal for the Foto Wien Festival in Vienna, which is a photography festival. And we were able to secure a venue for the exhibition. And the space was at the VBKÖ, which is the Verein Bildende Künstlerinnen Österreichs, which translated is the Association of Women Artists in Austria. And we showed our exhibition was titled The Female Landscape, Rethinking the Body Through the Photographic Image and Beyond. And we had a total of, I think it was one, two, three, four, five, six positions. One of them was an artist duo, and it was really amazing to have all of these people take part in the exhibition. And for that, for example, it was the curatorial process of also flying over there, um, looking at the space, giving curators tours, things like that, writing the exhibition text, also doing the nitty gritty things like putting together a budget. Honestly, huge shout out to Paula for that because she is a pro, um, and things like that. And then with the podcast, for example, I had a meeting this morning with a potential collaboration for the podcast. And so on my days off, I have meetings, I go and talk to people, I try and secure collaborations with people who might want to come be guests and things like that. So it's a huge mix on what my day-to-day looks like. It can look different depending on what I'm doing that day, I guess.
I love the diversity as well, and it seems
Yeah.
you really get to do all the avenues and all the things that you love to do, and it feels like the passion. I can see it in your face when you talk about it, very smiling. So yeah, that's wonderful. So talking about curations, and when you do your curations, like what are some of the things that you look out for, and like choosing the artists and the art pieces, and yeah, how's that for you?
I think because I have to be like modest, I guess, with it because I am still a baby curator when it comes to that. It's not like I've ever curated anything institutional or anything very big. And it's always very, you know, I get to work with emerging artists and I get to work kind of from more of a grassroots perspective in that. And I remember the first exhibition I ever curated was at Offshoot Gallery in East Finchley, which is where I lived at the time. If anyone listening wants to become a curator, the way that I got that opportunity was I was on my way to go grocery shopping and I saw the gallery that I hadn't seen before because I was going to a different store. Like I went a different route. So it was kind of kismet. But I walked in and I saw that they, featured more emerging artists and curators. And so I walked up to the gal that was sitting there and I was like, hey, do you guys take applications for curators or and they were like, yeah, come by, let's have a meeting. And so a week later, I came by, had a meeting with them, and they offered me a slot to curate an exhibition. And that was just from me going in on my grocery run and asking.
Yeah.
And at that point, they had had an artist in mind that they had wanted to have an exhibition with. And they said, would you like to curate an exhibition with him, like with his works? And the artist was Othello de Souza Hartley, who is a painter and photographer based in London. And we are friends to this day. But it was such an amazing experience for me to make the effort of learning how to think about how a viewer will walk through the space and experience the works, how the viewer will read the text, how that will impact how they view the works, and how the artist feels about how their works are presented. And so those were all the things that were going through my mind. And now keep in mind, there are people who have degrees in curating. They do an MA in curating at Courtauld. And so they are probably way more, I guess, prepared through their research and academic knowledge to answer these questions than I am. However, I have really enjoyed thinking about, and this is where arts engagement comes in, thinking about how the viewer will go through and how it will impact them through the exhibition. And so with the female landscape, for example, that was a little bit of a different one because um it was remote, first off, because I was in London and this exhibition was happening in Vienna. It was also a lot of artists. And it was something where I almost had to think about, you have to think about the practical things as well. You have to think about, okay, it might fit here thematically, but if you're having a group show under one umbrella theme and you want to have a certain feel throughout and you'd rather have these two artists together but this work doesn't fit in that space, you do have to learn how to adapt to that. And so it's almost like with choosing artists, choosing a theme, having a space, it all is something that kind of, you take each aspect and go step by step with each one because one influences the other and then that one influences the other thing. And so from this perspective, from this like emerging more grassroots perspective, you have to be really flexible, in my opinion. But I think that it's always important to have that goal in mind of what you're trying to do with the exhibition and how that resonates with the viewer as well as the artist, um, as well as how relevant it is in the arts as a whole.
Yeah. So having worked with artists and well, quite a lot of artists, and I've spoken to artists as well on your podcast, like what are some of the things that you would say you would give it as an advice, I guess, to somebody who wants to put their art into galleries or have exhibitions and, just to have that art career? What would be your advice or message to them?
I always say this, and I know it sounds so, I guess, naff at this point, but network,
Mm.
network, 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 because it's not only about making connections to see what someone could do for you. I feel like that's just the tip of the iceberg in what on what networking actually means. Because I think that networking, through that, you make connections to people. And these connections that you have with these people, they will impact you in ways that will allow you to grow in directions that you may not have thought you could grow in before. You will learn from people, you will be inspired by people, and these will all have positive impacts on you and your career. And of course, if you then end up really connecting with someone, like let's say you're an artist and you connect with a gallerist, it's not only about connecting with that person, but if they run an art gallery and you're connecting with that person and you guys are on the same wavelength in terms of how you view the arts, what type of art the gallerist exhibits versus the type of art that you create, if your ethos is aligned, sorry, in line or aligned, um, then that is something that can be incredibly blossoming in terms of a professional relationship. And so that's why I think for me, networking is a huge, huge thing.
Yeah.
The exchanging of ideas and things like that. I mean, it's been unbelievably beneficial for me personally as well. So yeah, networking.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for that. No, that's fantastic. And so I'm still curious about as well being an art historian, and I know I jumped from topics to topics, but kind of like
Go for it.
um, what is like for you the most epic thing I would say about art history that you felt really connected to, or that really was something where you would like, oh, I'm like, this is what I love about it, or this is what I'm taking from it. And yeah, what is that for you for the art of
uh, it's
history of
hard to
art? Sorry.
it's hard to choose, but I think it would have to be the fact that I'm trying not to say it in such a general way. I'm going to try to really explain what art has done for me personally in my life, because I feel like the way that artists have created art and what they have done, no matter if it's feminist art, political art, if it's emotional, if it's whatever it may be, interacting with that, studying it, researching it, and then formulating my own opinions about it through my studies has allowed me to not only increase my own personal empathy and knowledge about the world and human creativity and that expression of creativity, but it has also taught me about society and history and psychology and philosophy in ways that are incredibly, or for me personally, were incredibly accessible to understand. And so, one of the biggest examples was my political orientation and thinking about feminism. And I was always a feminist. I always believed in the equality of men and women and women's rights. However, I think that it was really through learning about, like, for example, with Judy Chicago and, oh, what, let me think. There's, uh, I don't know why it's not coming to me right now. What is wrong with me? Linda
Oh,
Nochlin. There we go. I was like, I literally preach this all the time. Linda Nochlin, why have there been no great women artists? And just ranging from all of these amazing women who have contributed to art history and art historical discourse in the, I'd say, probably late 20th century, that have impacted me the most, that have really, really changed the way that I view feminism, or I guess feminist discourse and theory. Mary Kelly, for example, with Postpartum Documents, that's an artwork that absolutely opened my eyes to motherhood in a way that I never thought I would see it. And this was all through an art history class and engaging with it through writing an essay,
mm,
you know? And so I really do think that that was something that art history has done. And going all the way back to Artemisia Gentileschi and her painting of Judith and Holofernes and the background behind that, behind trigger warning, the sexual assault that she experienced and the trauma around that, and thinking about all of that, I think has really impacted me a lot in that way, that has made me more of a fighter when it comes to feminism. But that's just an example. I think that there are so many things that art and art history has taught me and how it's impacted me But that's just one of the biggest examples, I'd say.
Yeah. And that's amazing. What was some of that for you, like, or what message in particular about feminism, I guess, uh, has it given you? Like, you've just given some examples, but just if you don't mind going a little deeper of what were some of those things that you really connected with from the artists that you just shared, or maybe just one of them that you feel like you'd want to share.
I think with Mary Kelly, for example, with the postpartum document that I mentioned, one of the most impactful things was she basically displayed a diaper with fecal matter from her baby.
Mm.
And the one of the biggest statements about that was, oh, look at this accomplishment as a mother, that my child has normal fecal matter. That means it's healthy. That means I'm keeping my child healthy. And this is now a very condensed like summary of one little part of that whole work, because the work also um, involves speech development and, you know, all of these different things that she, uh, I guess, took or kept track of after she had her child. And I think that it was, for me, a very big lesson on the emotional and mental labor, unpaid labor that women conduct on a daily basis that doesn't get recognized. And then to further that, you know, something that I connect is Invisible Women, a book by Caroline Criado Perez that is about the gender data gap in our society, where, like, just for example, women are more likely to die in car accidents because the seat belts are more catered to the standard average size and weight of a man than a woman. But, you know, thinking about all of that emotional labor that women do is so incredibly exhausting. And I found that the fact that this was something that Mary Kelly was investigating, or at least looking at, but in a way that was also full of love, because motherhood and having a child is very special. But I think it was just really reiterating everything that you think about as a mother and what you do and go through and how your day changes, how your life completely changes. But everyone says that, yeah, your life's going to change when you have a baby. But I felt like Mary Kelly really brought it to a point by creating her postpartum document. Um, and yeah, so that was something like on motherhood and emotional and mental labor.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. What was your moment where you decided, or where you knew, or like that the passion you have for feminism? Was there like a pivotal moment for you that kind of reinforced that, or kind of made you aware of that?
I think it was a gradual process. I think I was always very um feminist. However, I think when I moved to London and started learning more, I think I was able to articulate these things better. And I think that was the biggest crux of it, was being able to sit and actually think about, or I guess formulate in my mind what I think, how I think, what informs that, and then being able to voice it. And that was when I started to be more vocal about things. And you can ask any of my friends. Um, I get in arguments all the time with people about feminism, not because I want to argue, but because it's so incredibly important to me. Like, one of my best friends made a comment the other day, and I got quite upset because he was talking about a colleague. And he was like, it just annoys me how she walks in thinking she's better than people. And I said, would you say that about a man? Are you literally just standing in front of me and telling me that you would say that about your male colleague because he's dressed well? Like, it was about how she was dressed. And he then thought about it and he apologized. And he was like, you know what? I was being an absolute, you know, a-hole. And I was like, yeah, you were. And he apologized and it was fine. But I I think it's really important to have these conversations because he wouldn't have thought about it otherwise. And I don't necessarily want to be the person who's constantly arguing about feminism or things like that. But if I have developed the ability and confidence to be able to articulate my beliefs, then that's what I'm going to be doing. And I think it was when I moved to London and studied art history at UCL and learned how to articulate my thoughts and feelings better through my degree that I then started to be able to do that. but there was never like a defining moment where I was like, I am 100% a feminist. I think that was for as long as I can remember, at least. Maybe when I was a teenager and didn't fully understand all these things, I don't know what I would have said, but uh, for as long as I can remember, I've been a feminist.
Yeah. So with going back in time, and you just mentioned when you were a teenager, somehow it was already there. So it's something that's been with you. Would there be something like from your parents that's been kind of, were they feminists as well, or your mom, or was there something that trickled down from how you grew up?
Yeah, I think both of my parents, my dad, he raised me by saying, honey, we play by Alexandra's rules or Alexandra doesn't play. And I think that that is one of the most feminist things you can say. Like you have your strengths. And he never said to me, because my dad, like little personal backstory, my mom and my dad met in a Taekwondo martial arts class. And so my dad was a black belt in Taekwondo, and he was also a bodybuilder when he was younger. And when it comes to, for example, body image and those struggles that women go through, my dad was always so cute, and he'd always say, oh honey, you look so strong. He'd always tell me I look strong whenever, if we went to the store and I'd try something on or things like that. It was never like, oh, it was never anything other than strength. And I found that so wonderful. My sink's gonna do it. Bear with 1 second.
No worries.
Oh, the pleasures of living in a tiny, tiny place in London. Let's hope that that stops soon. Sorry.
Don't worry, that's fine. I understand. Like, I hardly hear it, but I understand when you hear it, it kind of can be distracting.
Oh, it's good that you hardly hear it though. That's good
Yeah,
to know.
yeah. I have.
Because maybe if it gets very, very sporadic, then I can just
Yeah, yeah.
can you hear any other noises? Like if I talk, can you
No,
hear?
nothing.
Okay,
Yeah, I heard very, very much in the background, a little bit, dun, 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 but it wasn't. Yeah.
fabulous. That's super good to know. Okay, then I'll just continue talking. Um, and so that was with my dad. And with my mom, I think the biggest thing that she did was set an example of what a strong woman looks like. So my mom and I, me being an only child and a teenager and moving to Austria with my mom, I was kind of an angry kid. And my mom had to navigate that. And now I have to say that my mom is one of my best friends in the entire world. Like, I can't go more than a couple of days without talking to my mom. I usually call her every day. And she taught me how to be strong, how to be adaptive to an environment. She taught me how to be driven. And her and I are both kind of workaholics. But all she does is encourage me and tell me that she's so proud of me. And I watched her grow as well in the years that we had moved to Austria, and also grow as a mother to me and be more understanding to me and change as a woman. And so I think having that example of such an impressive and strong woman in my life was also something that I guess inherently influenced how I feel about women. But also watching the struggles that my mom had to go through. I'll go back to, the example of body image where my dad was like, "You're so strong." My mom was influenced by that generation of Twiggy and heroin chic and all of these things. And I look back and think, wow, we've both had to kind of grow up in in under these societal pressures that caused us to think that we're not worthy if we aren't thin. And so it's these types of things. And this is, as I said, just a small example because I mentioned it earlier as well. But, it's things like that where I see what my mom goes through as a woman and how that reflects the wider struggles of women as a whole and what feminism fights for.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I love that your dad told you you're strong. I think that's really beautiful. And the message for you, that because feminism is like the theme, but then to everyone there's still like the personal messages, I guess, that you'd want to um bring to the world. What is that particular message from you, or for you, from you, for everybody?
um I think in terms of what I think about feminism, or what people should
Yeah.
feel about.
Yeah, what you feel passionate about sharing with people about feminism, that you're connected to and that you want
Hmm.
to, I guess, somehow educate the world on
Yeah.
around.
I think it's my I think it's my feminist rage. I'm not gonna lie. I think that I am so angry, and I want to explain why. I think that, as I said, reading, for example, Invisible Women, and the fact that it is literally costing women their lives in certain countries because of the inequalities. Just look at what is going on around the world now. We're in 2023. And I just think that men are still out here saying stupid things like not all men, when I'm trying to talk about a serious feminist issue. And it's like, yes, okay, fine, fine, get over yourself. It is not you. Stop making it about you. Stop centering yourself in this conversation. And I think that it's just that aspect of, I would like to share and make it clear to people why I am so angry, because it is really, really hurting 50% of the population, because we're not aware of all of these data gaps and all of these things that are happening. And so that's, kind of bringing it back to art a little bit. Art is a way to communicate that I find so incredibly accessible and powerful. I mean, just look at the Gorilla Girls. It's, looking at all the paintings of naked women in the Met versus the paintings by women. And the discrepancy there is incredible. And that's how we view women in society, or that's how it's been presented in Western art history. And I hate that. So it's just this incredible drive to make a difference in the world, to make sure that the women in the next generations have a safer place to exist.
Yeah, wow, wow, that's powerful. And I can really feel the sense of purpose there, like you sharing with the world on that, and that anger being, that energy of passion really that you have about that topic, and like seeing who is actually, yeah, struggling because of that, and how important it is to change those things. So I think that's, yeah, admirable.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. So in terms of your relationship with your creativity, tell me more about that, and like, how do you express yourself creatively, but also what was your relationship to your creativity like? And it's not just obviously painting and art, and but creativity is so unique to everybody. But what was it for you, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of what makes my job so fun is that I can be creative with how I approach things. And I think creativity is there's such a broad spectrum of creativity. But if I take my biggest passion project as my example, which is the All About Art podcast, me being creative has involved me thinking about who would be great to talk to, who would I like to hear from, how would that impact people, all the way down to what colors should I use in the promo material on Instagram, and putting together these little decks or posts or things like that. But I think that creativity involves creation, and so creating this project that has an impact is a way that I have a lot of fun. And I also do think that having that aspect of creativity means also being able to think a little bit more laterally, being able to open up to different things, being able to take initiative, being able to think out of the box in order to find opportunities.
All right.
And so I think that that is how my creativity manifests itself. But then, if we think on another level of more the visual side that I absolutely love, there are two things that I have a lot of fun with. Um, and that is clothes. I think that it is really important to me in how I dress. Um, and how I express myself that way. It's not like I have this like super out of this world fashion sense, but it is important to me that my personality and how I feel inside manifests itself on how I dress on the outside. And then another big thing is art collecting.
Yeah.
So I feel like creating a space in my home that makes me feel like I'm surrounded by the beautiful creations of my friends. And I mean, not just friends, also artists that I respect and appreciate, and all of that has been such a joy that is a very happy symptom of my career. And so I think that those are ways in which they manifest. And then one final way that my creativity has come in handy or been incredibly useful in my career is through writing,
Mm.
because I've written essays, I write exhibition reviews, I write my podcast episodes when I do them solo, I write talks, all of these things. So I think that that is when I can really get creative and let what I feel and what I think about works of art flow. And that's kind of probably the most creative and beautiful thing that I can do in my career.
Yeah, wonderful. So beautiful, and lots of avenues of creativity there.
Yeah. So I keep like jumping back and forth and grabbing different things, but I guess that is the nature of what I do. I wear a lot of hats.
Has there any time been a moment where you felt that you were not being creative, and how has that impacted and how you felt in life?
That was definitely when I moved to Austria and I was in the business school,
Mm.
because my whole focus at that time was to learn German. And just for the record, like with the Handelsakademie, with that school, I was told by two different professors that I would never learn German.
Wow.
So that's a big middle finger to them, because I ended up graduating high school with honors. But, hey, here we go. They also had my IQ tested because they thought that I might need, I don't know, a different, because I wasn't understanding things and I wasn't being responsive because I didn't speak the language.
Right.
Um, they thought that, I don't know, I guess they wanted to test my IQ. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to talk about these things, and how at that time people were really not open to someone coming to the school who didn't speak the language and who had to learn it. And I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But in those first, I'd say probably around 3 years, I was trying to find creative outlets for myself. And it was really difficult because I think a lot of my mental and emotional energy went into learning the language and trying to just adapt to a brand new country and new people, and then also trying to navigate being 14 and learning how to be a teenager and deal with all of those emotions. And so I think that was where I really felt like my creativity and my creative flow was just not at all nurtured. I mean, before I moved to Austria, when I was in the States in middle school, I used to take part in drama club, which meant that I was on stage a lot. I sang in musicals. I used to draw in my free time. Like I used to play piano, all of these different things that, I mean, to be completely honest with you, after I moved, I didn't continue with any of that because I was so concentrated on learning the language and surviving. And I mean surviving like mentally with a good mental health, which, um, things like that. So, yeah.
It's it's quite a big one to move to a country and then be at school and not knowing, not learning, not knowing the language, and having to learn that and adapt to all the changes, and the change from, the States to then be in Austria. That's also culturally very
Hmm.
different. And so yeah, so I can understand how that must have felt. I moved to Spain when I was 11, so I had a similar experience going to an English school and learning English and Spanish, and I didn't know what was going on for a while. So I
Yeah.
have a feeling.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So it really resonates with you then. You get it.
I
The
understand.
girls who get it, get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah. So I'm just mindful of the time, and we
Yeah.
have so many more questions that I would like go into.
I still have time, but I do understand that. So like no stress on that. I don't have anything.
All right, all right. So I guess for people that you know there's a lot of people and listeners that might listen to this podcast who feel maybe that they're not a creative, and I'm a believer, and that's the purpose of this podcast, is to share that they are creative innately, and that there is this part within them that they can access, where they can allow the creativity to flow, and but they might not believe it yet. So I guess what would be a word from, or something that comes up for you now, I know it's on the spot, that might help them to discover their creativity, or feel more hopeful about that they are, or what might they inspire them right now to almost be like, okay, maybe I am creative. And yeah, what might be something that comes up for you around this?
I think one of the biggest things would be to think about what's fun for you. And depending on what's fun, I think that that's what you can gravitate towards, because once you have that intrinsic, I guess, motivation or inspiration to continue with something, that's when your mind starts to find different avenues of exploring that more. And I think that that is inherently then using your creativity to continue with what you love. So if you're really interested in, I don't know, oh gosh, there's so many different things that you could be interested in, that you could love, and that you could then explore creatively. I think that, I mean, oh gosh, this is going to be such a dumb example, but I don't know why it's popped into my head. But if you love sports and basketball, but you also love painting, combine that, paint a basketball, see how you feel. I don't know. It's just, it's, I think that we live in a society, and this is such a hypocritical thing coming from me, who kind of doesn't stop working in a good way, but I do kind of use my passion as my career, which means that I work all the time, but in a good way, I guess.
Yeah.
I try to take more breaks. That is my New Year's resolution. But I think moving away from that and pretending that I'm a little bit better at that. Um, I think that our society is so focused on side hustles and monetizing things, and trying to make everything a structured, I guess, strategic approach on how to be successful through what you love. And that's great. And I'm really loving doing that for myself. But I do feel like it doesn't allow people to be fully, or letting their creative juices flow, letting it loose a little bit, and letting go of this idea of, what do other people want to see? What gap am I filling in a market? And
Right.
instead think about, as I said, what makes you happy, what is fun for you. And once you discover that, I think that that is something that will be so rewarding. And then the creativity and ideas and motivation on, how can I continue this, how can I have more fun, how can I experience this more, if it's through yoga classes and trying out different types of sports, or I do feel like being creative and taking initiative with things, like, it can really come through anything in life. It doesn't have to be like through the arts. Now if you're specifically an artist, uh gosh, I mean, if you already create art, then you probably don't feel intimidated by um, thinking that you don't have the means to be creative or something like that. But um, I'm just going to take the example of my friend Betty, who worked in banking for a large part of her life, and then decided to do a complete career switch and is now an artist. And behind me, which you can't really see, but there's an artwork by Betty right there. She works with artificial intelligence, and I think that her work is just absolutely phenomenal, and she's phenomenal. And So for anyone who is in like a profession where they don't feel like they can be creative, like for example, banking or things like that, um, I just think that there is always an opportunity to find something that you love and feel like that's something you can pursue, even if it's not something you want to monetize or make a career out of. That is totally okay. So I guess a long, rambly way of saying it, because I guess I was formulating my own thoughts through speaking. I think that don't concentrate so much on monetizing things or making something profitable or a side hustle. Just concentrate on having fun. And I think the creativity will follow.
I love that. I love that because that takes off so much of the pressure and allows them to actually be creative, because oftentimes it's people think about everything in life with how is that going to give me something back, like whether that's like from whether it's from childhood on from the parents, not everybody is like this, or from schools, like what are you going to decide to be, or who are you going to decide to be, what profession are you going to do, everything about how is that going to bring me income. And therefore, you know even though, like you said, it's great to have that ability to monetize what you're passionate about and actually do that every day, but then also it can take away the relaxation of actually just creating without it needing to become something for somebody else, because doing something for yourself and without that pressure of it having to be liked by somebody or bought by somebody, that's a completely different level. So yeah, I love that. Thank you. Thank you for
Sorry
sharing.
that it was so rambly. I feel like you summarized it very well, but I took a while to get there.
I love to hear to the thought when it's being created. So wonderful.
Good.
Yes, and before we kind of come to an end with the session, I still had one lingering question actually about like the difference about what you see in the history of art, of how, and it's obviously clear through all the different epochen and everything, and in the history of art to see the changes, but like what do you feel is the biggest difference between the art then, and you can choose what then means for you, and now?
Mhm. Oof. Wow. It's really amazing. I think one of the biggest things is the purpose of art. And it's always this big debate on what the purpose of art is or should be. But if you look at, back in the Renaissance and Baroque, a lot of it was aristocracy and religion defining what type of art was created or commissioned. And then if we think about later on in, through the late 19th century and 20th century, um, I think that it's very relevant in terms of uh, people started to think about what art can do for society, for themselves. And then in the 20th century, it was very much a, well, how can we play with this a little bit more? How can we go against some of these notions? And then I think now it's quite an interesting thing to look at because um, obviously I know the most about what I'm experiencing now because I'm very much in the sector. But I think, I was reading this the other day, and I think it was the Fairfax or somewhere. They were writing about a golden age in art and what a golden age actually means, and how everyone kind of thinks that, the golden age was, this time, and everyone seems to think that they have lived through a golden age of the sector that they're in. And so I think that we're going to look back at this time and maybe think that this was a golden age, or maybe in a couple of years we're going to feel like that's the golden age of the contemporary times, and we're going to be able to, I guess, structure or define what this period is. Um, However, I do think that, as I said, I think it's the purpose, really what has changed through you see biblical stories and various portraits of dukes and duchesses and kings and queens. And I think that that's something that's that was incredibly prevalent, obviously, hundreds of years ago. And now, if you look at like Dan Flavin, who is currently exhibiting at, what was it? Is it White Cube, Levy Gorvy? Oh goodness, maybe I should pick a different artist where I actually know where they're exhibiting. Um, let's say, let's use Cause as an example. I mean, I think that is something it's just completely different. But thinking about the purpose of art and how it impacts people, uh, that has definitely changed. I'm trying not to get too like, I think what's difficult is that I think so much about what's going on now and thinking about analyzing the current situation of like art and the art sector. And so I think that I'm trying to not get too into that, because I think
Yeah.
that's just too much focus on that. Whereas thinking about the past and how it's changed through impressionism, and thinking about how figuration has then kind of dissipated and how it became very about conceptual practices, and then in the 20th century how the emergence of the curator became so incredibly relevant, and how that how the type of art that was prevalent at the time then impacted arts and culture as a whole, and also, as I said, like conceptual art. Then now this is quite like um again summarizing it in a few words when actually it's quite complex, but having conceptual art emerge in the 20th century and having that be very relevant then kind of led to the curator becoming more important in how art is communicated. So it's all of these different things where I think that, yeah, the purpose of art and how it has changed throughout art history has impacted the arts and cultural sector, um, coming, all the way to present day.
Yeah, that's super interesting actually to hear that from you, and just to kind of like have an art historian actually share like the perspective and what might be some of the difference. So thank you for that. So what wonderful point to finish this awesome conversation with you. And before we just say our goodbyes, I just want to for you to share. Obviously I've got everything under this podcast, like all your where people can find you, but also do share and your podcast as well. But if you have any projects right now going on, or something that you want to share that's coming up, and also whether that's for anything that you're doing, please share that with us right now.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the All About Art podcast. If someone is interested in, obviously, if you're interested in creativity listening to this podcast, then you're going to be interested, hopefully, in the arts and cultural sector. And the podcast is very much concentrated on, I guess, the very wide, broad subject matter of what could I have used when I was 21? What information would have been great when I was starting out and studying and not knowing what types of jobs there are in the arts? And on the podcast, you can listen to me talk about all different sorts of things like art censorship in the arts, or those types of cultural policy things, art news, but also interviews with people like I collaborated with the Peggy Guggenheim collection and interviewed a curator there, Georgina Subalite. Or, for example, we have really exciting things coming up this year that I am really looking forward to announcing later on. But yeah, I would just say I would absolutely love it if people felt like they would be interested in tuning in to the podcast.
Awesome. Well, I can't say enough how I would love for all of you just to come and listen to Alexandra's podcast. And I've already subscribed as well to your newsletter to
Oh, yeah.
people want to do that, go ahead and do that. You'll get lots of value from all of it. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure to have you here.
No, thank you. Thank you. It was absolutely lovely.
Wonderful. I look forward to catching up soon as well. And for now, I'd say we'll end here. Thank you.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Wishing you a lovely rest of your day.